The story kicks off at school where Poemu is getting called out for her bleached blonde hair and her ridiculously short skirt. The one doing the calling out is Tugo, the school's most by-the-book disciplinary monitor. And yeah, he's absolutely full of himself. Poemu, queen of not my problem, fires back that it's none of his business. But Tugo, with that voice of someone who thinks he runs the place, makes it crystal clear that even if they're both students, he's the president of the disciplinary committee, and he will hand out warnings to whoever needs one. No exceptions, no mercy. So Poemu pulls out the school rulebook and throws it right in his face. Neither her hair nor her skirt violated anything. It was all within reasonable limits. Tugo admits that technically, no, nothing was against the rules. But then he points to the skirt, which barely covered anything. You could literally see the fabric hugging the most precious part of her. Completely deadpan, he asks if Poemu is some kind of exhibitionist, because apparently she thinks walking around like that is totally normal. Mortified, Poemu slams her knees together and calls Tugo a liar, insisting her underwear wasn't showing. But the guy, instead of dropping it, keeps going. Says he's seen it before, that the style is, let's say, provocative, and that it's distracting to the other students. Poemu, red with rage and embarrassment, tells him to stop looking because that makes him a total creep. Tugo, trying to fix the situation in absolutely the worst way possible, apologizes and says what he meant was that it was extremely sexy. Poemu nearly sends him to another dimension with a punch to the gut. Then she just turns around and storms off, seething. Tugo, shaking and barely able to speak, tries to say she'd be getting a warning for violence. But to do that, he needed her name and homeroom, which he didn't have. And before he could even finish his sentence, the punch hit so hard the poor guy threw up right then and there. Back in the classroom with Motoko and Rui by her side, Poemu goes off about that creepy monitor. Rui drops a solid joke. If Tugo ever finds out her name in class, he'll be on Poemu's case every single moment of every single day. Motoko agrees. It would be a complete nightmare if her name landed in his hands. Then a teacher calls Poemu over. She'd have to do makeup sessions for skipping class. When the door opens, it's Tugo. Poemu goes stiff as a board. But the monitor only came in to pass along a message for the teacher. He had a last-minute meeting and left an assignment in his place. Poemu exhales. No lecture, just homework. Then Tugo sits down next to her to work on the assignment together. Poemu is floored. This was the last thing she expected from someone as straight-laced and serious as him. She finishes first, obviously. Because yeah, she's actually really good at math. Tugo, with this pained look on his face, mutters a good job while staring at his own worksheet like it personally wronged him. Poemu doesn't waste the opportunity. She roasts him, says the exercises were easy, and flat out asks with zero shame if Tugo is just dumb. The guy visibly flinches, like she hit a nerve dead on. He starts explaining that he's known for being hardworking and disciplined, but that academic work is his weak spot. Poemu confirms, yeah, he's just not that smart, and good, he deserves it. But then Tugo makes this sad little face, and she changes her mind. She decides to help him, like she's doing the guy the biggest favor of his life, except she gets hit with a hard no. She stands up, calls him hopeless, launches into a whole speech, and after a lot of internal debate, Tugo finally asks for her help. By the end of the day, the two of them are walking out of school together. Tugo thanks her and says the whole thing made him reflect, that he'd been carrying some pretty unfounded assumptions that had kept him narrow-minded. He looks at Poemu and admits, he used to think she was just a troublemaker, but he realized how genuinely kind she actually is. Poemu smiles and warns him that the help wasn't free. In exchange, Tugo would have to turn a blind eye to her hair and her skirt. Tugo refuses immediately. There is no way he's letting a skirt that short, one that shows off someone's underwear, slide. Poemu goes red again, but then Tugo says she's someone of captivating beauty, sweet and kind, and that he doesn't want someone like that to put herself in danger. Still, since she helped him understand himself better, he'll allow the skirt, 5 centimeters above the knee. And one more thing, he already knows her name. He saw it written on the paper. It's Poemu, you got a problem with that? She says, embarrassed by her own name, and punches Tugo again. Tugo is in charge of opening and closing the school gates, so he always gets there earlier and leaves later than everyone else. He apologizes for keeping her so late, and then slips up and calls Poemu by her name. She gets annoyed immediately. Tugo gets hit again, and is genuinely stunned by how strong she is. Without really meaning to, Poemu ends up inviting Tugo to walk her home, after he pointed out that it was dangerous for someone to be out alone that late. He insists on going with her even though she doesn't want him to, and takes another punch for it. On the way, Poemu asks for his first name, since he already knows hers. The two start actually talking, and she mentions that if she'd lived just 50 meters to the left, she would have gone to the same middle school as Tugo. He responds flatly. Poemu asks if he's always been this serious, even if he is kind of serious and a little clueless at the same time. Tugo explains that his dad was really strict, so he grew up rigid and by the rules, and his classmates always found him boring and suffocating. Poemu asks if he resents his dad for it. She resents hers, because of her name. Tugo gets curious about why she hates her own name so much, but she finds it embarrassing. A lifelong source of embarrassment. Tugo thinks it's a fine name. Poemu's phone rings, her mom calling. The call gets a little awkward with Tugo right there, but afterward he says that Poemu is a lovely girl and that the name suits her perfectly. A wave of embarrassment crashes over her, and this time, the punch she threw was kind of weak. Outside Poemu's house, she thanks him and apologizes for making Tugo walk so far out of his way. He says goodbye, using her last name like she always insisted, but this time it felt different. Poemu calls him back, just to tell him he could use her first name. She gets curious about where Tugo lives. He takes a few steps and he's already home. Poemu is completely stunned. The guy lived 50 meters from her house, and they'd never once crossed paths on the way to school. Then it hits her. He always left earlier and came back later than everyone else. The next day, after school, Poemu is at a coffee shop with Motoko and Rui. Rui notices Poemu's mind is somewhere else entirely. On Tugo, obviously. Her eyes are practically sparkling. Motoko snaps her back to reality. Rui mentions that a student saw Poemu and Tugo walking home together, and asks if it's true. Poemu spits out her coffee, nervous, denies everything, says she would never be caught dead hanging out with a guy like him. At the absolute worst moment, Tugo shows up outside the coffee shop window laying down the law. He asks for the names and homerooms of all three of them. Rui and Motoko answer with absolute delight written all over their faces. Meanwhile, Poemu is panicking. She tries to give Tugo a subtle signal, a discreet wink, but the guy completely misread it, called her by name in front of everyone, and got punched for it. Her friends start roasting her, bringing up old nicknames from before Poemu had her meltdown and started hating her own name. In a sneaky little scheme, the girls almost got Tugo to break the rules without even realizing it. They pinned the poor guy down and nearly forced him to drink the coffee. They called Poemu over. Her mission was to pour the coffee into his mouth. She grabbed the cup. Her friends were pushing her, and on impulse, Poemu downed the whole thing herself and burned her tongue. The girls say goodbye to Tugo. On the way back, Poemu's in a bit of a funk. Rui and Motoko comment that Tugo is actually pretty cool. Poemu runs after him just to apologize. Even if her friends had been messing around, they're good people. Tugo gets it, but makes one thing clear. Rules are rules. If they pull something like that again, they're getting written up. Poemu is mid-apology when her friends pop back out of nowhere. They went home and came back, and suggest going out for tea. Poemu almost calls them out, but Rui drops a subtle hint, tells Poemu she doesn't need to worry, they're not going to steal Tugo from her. Poemu turns beet red and denies everything. Very, very hard. The next day, Poemu, Rui, and Motoko are sprinting through the hallways, which is obviously against the rules. Tugo yells after them, gets completely ignored. Motoko cuts through a door and rolls her ankle, but the real problem is that there's a staircase right there, and she goes face first straight into some guy. His name is Izubuchi. She looks up and takes in his face, jaw-droppingly attractive with this whole rugged, masculine energy. Right after that, Izubuchi goes off on her, sharp voice, demanding to know if she's hurt. Poemu steps in and calls him out for the way he talked to Motoko. Tugo spots Izubuchi and thanks him for helping, then introduces him to the girls. Izubuchi is on the health committee. He shows off the lab coat with his title as committee chief printed on it. The girls are a little skeptical. The guy looks like he should be in a back alley brawl, not a school committee. Izubuchi gives Tugo grief for letting students run in the hallways. Tugo agrees and apologizes, but also calls Izubuchi out for not noticing that Motoko had sprained her ankle, since making sure students are okay is literally his job. Izubuchi grabs Motoko, frustrated that she didn't tell him the truth, and then, like an absolute maniac, scoops her up bridal style and heads straight for the nurse's office. Poemu turns to Tugo and notes that those two are actually a lot alike, both dead serious and completely obsessed with doing their jobs right. The next day starts with some fresh gossip. Izubuchi used to be a notorious delinquent. Poemu doesn't doubt for a second that he still is, but Rui pushes back, says he's turned his life around and is totally serious now, and adds that Izubuchi is incredibly popular with the girls precisely because he carries them around like they're actual princesses. Rui tells Poemu to look behind her. Motoko was already completely head over heels for that move. During an assembly speech from the principal, Poemu starts daydreaming about girls being carried around like that, and imagines Tugo carrying her. The thought makes her face go completely red. Some students start complaining about the heat and feeling dizzy. Izubuchi shows up out of nowhere, wildly handing out cooling patches to everyone. But Tugo cuts in, insisting on helping him to repay a debt. Poemu watches the two of them make a complete spectacle of themselves and thinks the whole situation is absolutely ridiculous. But then she starts feeling faint herself and collapses into Rui's arms. who calls for help from the guys. The patches are all gone. The only option is to get Poemu to the nurse's office. The question is, which one of them is taking her? Poemu watches as both of them come barreling toward her, fighting over who gets to carry her, and she does not want either one of them. Out of nowhere, Poemu goes full Super Saiyan, and both of them get wrecked. Another school day kicking off in the most classic way possible. Poemu getting chewed out by Tugo. The two of them had agreed that her skirt could be, at most, 5 centimeters above the knee. But Tugo, of course, didn't trust her word for it, and used his own hand to measure. Poemu lost it the second that hand touched her leg, and bam! Fist to the face. Rui and Motoko were having a whole serious heart-to-heart with Poemu about the feelings she clearly had for Tugo, but refused to admit. Like, they thought the two of them should just own it already. Poemu obviously denied everything. It wasn't like that at all, but the two of them got completely emotional anyway, because Poemu, for the first time ever, was actually getting close to a guy. Back in middle school, bro, she was literally a one-woman wrecking crew to any boy who dared come near her. Poemu swears that's a lie, that she was totally sweet and harmless. But the truth? The real, unfiltered truth? She was out there dropping boys left and right without a second thought. So she heads off down the hallway, muttering to herself, "Those two are such a headache. This is all Tugo's fault. That airhead. That total doofus." Then out of nowhere, Tugo materializes right beside her like he teleported, calling her out on exactly what she just said. Asks where she's headed. To the library. Tugo lets her know that Rui told him she goes there to nap, and immediately starts lecturing her, worried that if she sleeps that much during the day, she won't be able to sleep at night. Poemu fires back instantly. Tugo has zero business in her personal life, but he disagrees. That was literally his job, keeping order and discipline. Poemu gets to the library and starts figuring out what to read. Deep down, yeah, she used to go there just to sleep, but lately she'd actually gotten into reading. She spots the perfect book. Only problem, it's way too high up on the shelf. And then salvation appears in the form of a guy, Seiichi, a kind, impossibly good-looking dude. But then Poemu notices something about him. The way he talks, the way he carries himself. There was no mistaking it. This guy was another hall monitor. Dude, this school has not a single normal hall monitor. Not one. Seiichi walks over and introduces himself, mentioning that he'd noticed the change in Poemu. Before she only came to sleep, now she was actually reading. He mentions she used to curl up in a corner and crash hard. Poemu gets uncomfortable finding out he'd been watching her sleep. She then asks if people wouldn't think it was weird seeing her read, like a total fish out of water. Seiichi tells her not to worry about that, even if it was true, because watching her focused on a book was as beautiful as a work of art. Poemu is completely floored by that. Seiichi recommends a book for her. Suddenly, a whole crowd of girls swarms around him, all very obviously trying to flirt. He was popular with the ladies. He seemed like a show-off, but he actually had the goods to back it up. As for the book, Poemu found it genuinely interesting. Later, sitting on a bench next to Tugo, she brings up Seiichi and says she's going to ask him for more recommendations. Tugo raises an eyebrow. Didn't Poemu go to the library to nap? She says she's going to actually read now. Tugo gets all giddy finding out something new about her, and immediately suggests they go see Seiichi together since they're in the same class. When they get to the classroom, Tugo calls out to a short, chubby, buck-toothed, total nerd by name, Seiichi. Poemu can't believe it. No way. Absolutely not. That was not the Seiichi she'd seen in the library. Tugo whispers to the little guy, interrupting his reading, saying Poemu wanted to thank him for the book recommendation. She drops a flat thanks with zero enthusiasm, still in total disbelief that this was the same person. But the chubby guy replies, "No problem," and immediately starts complaining that they came all the way there just to flirt right in his face. Poemu was half a second from knocking him out, but Tugo grabbed her just in time. Tugo explains, this Seiichi was different from the one she'd seen. It was something the whole class knew, but the truth is, Seiichi transforms every time he walks into the library. Like he totally unleashes, becomes a completely different person, way more charming. Nothing like who he is in the real world. Seiichi calls Poemu Sleeping Beauty, hyped up about finding out she liked the book. Tugo says Seiichi is basically a hermit crab in human form. Seiichi confirms without missing a beat. Yeah, pretty much. He apologizes to Poemu, explaining that, appearances aside, he's genuinely introverted. Poemu couldn't care less about the explanation. She just wants one thing. Stop calling me Sleeping Beauty. It's so embarrassing. Seiichi thinks that's a shame, because the nickname is about as embarrassing as her actual name. Tugo asks what the whole Sleeping Beauty thing is about. Seiichi explains he started calling her that because she used to come to the library just to sleep, and the face she made was too cute to ignore. She looked like a little kid snoring away, mouth wide open. Poemu turns beet red with embarrassment and rage. Tugo immediately tells Seiichi to take it back, because there was nothing wrong with snoring and sleeping with your mouth open. Poemu was still cute as a princess no matter what. Poemu smacks Tugo. Shut up. There is not a single normal hall monitor in this entire school. Seiichi picks out a book for Tugo, while asking him point blank why he's doing pointless patrol routes at lunch. Is it because he doesn't have any friends? Tells him to read something instead of wandering the halls alone with nobody to hang out with. That one landed. Poemu gets worried and tells Seiichi to knock it off. Seiichi comments that it's sweet how Poemu rushes to defend her little boyfriend. She goes nuclear and hurls Seiichi with full force out of the library, and as he flies out, he slowly reverts back to his normal self, chubby, short, and buck-toothed as always. Tugo and Poemu stand close together while Seiichi lies on the floor grumbling. Poemu considers out loud whether to give him another one. She vents. Dealing with the idiot hall monitors at this school is such a drag, Tugo included, and she says it straight to his face. But the guy is looking all downcast. Poemu asks if he's still hung up on what Seiichi said. Tugo had genuinely stopped to think. Does he really not have any friends? He tries to convince himself that school is for studying, not making friends. Poemu smacks him. We're friends, aren't we? Tugo lights up with the goofiest grin. Thanks, Poemu, says she's the best. Then Rui and Motoko cook up a whole dramatic little script for Poemu. But the truth is, I've always wanted to be someone special to Tugo one day. Rui chimes in that she's his friend too. Motoko also. Tugo had just picked up 3 new friends. Poemu always disappears at lunch. But today, after digging through her entire bag, she can't find her lunchbox. Her mom had made lunch with love, and it was just gone. Tugo appears out of nowhere, thinks it's weird to see her by herself, asks what's up. Poemu explains about the lunchbox. Tugo takes it seriously. Way too seriously. This was practically a crime. A meal made with love by Poemu's mom. They had to find that lunch immediately. It wasn't in the classroom. Poemu also hadn't taken it out of her bag. Tugo drops a wild theory. Poemu's lunch was stolen. Who, in the entire universe, would bother stealing someone's lunch? Poemu tells him to drop it. He ignores her. Time to retrace every step Poemu took today. In the morning, Tugo caught heat right after saying good morning. After that, Poemu went to the nurse's office and she'd hurt her knee. The nurse confirms it. Poemu begs Tugo to give up, she's literally starving. At the library, Seiichi confirms Poemu stopped by to return a book, same as plenty of other students, and takes the opportunity to point out that the whole stolen lunch idea was way too dramatic. Tugo disagrees. Maybe Poemu has a stalker. Seiichi can barely hold back a laugh. Poemu with a stalker? Not a chance. Poemu gets offended and Seiichi's head gets a clean punch to the face. The next place was somewhere Poemu really didn't want to bring up. The bathroom. Tugo thinks it out loud. It would be pretty strange for a student to drag their whole bag and lunch into the bathroom. Poemu loses patience and stamps a brand new mark right on his face. Walking down a hallway, Tugo notices Poemu always cuts through there. She mentions the hydrangeas, gorgeous flowers she absolutely loves. Tugo gets all excited again, discovering yet another new thing about her. Poemu gives up on the search and heads to the cafeteria to find Rui and Motoko. But before she goes, she calls Tugo to come along. The girls ask where they'd been. Poemu says she'd lost something and went back through everywhere she'd been that morning. Motoko asks what it was, and then Rui suddenly goes, "So you went through the nurse's office and the library?" Thunder. Tugo glances at Rui differently. How did she know that? Rui answers that she'd been with Poemu the whole morning. A lightning strike. Tugo goes dead serious. For the sake of discipline, he had to reveal a devastating truth. The person who stole Poemu's lunch was Rui! Rui makes a what face, but then she plays along, pretending she actually did it, that she ate every single bite of Poemu's lunch. Then the school intercom crackles on. A voice calls for Poemu. Rays of golden sunlight break through the clouds. Poemu is fuming as her mom explains, completely embarrassed, that she forgot to put the lunchbox in the bag. When she realized, she ran straight to school to drop it off. Rui and Motoko sprint over to hug the woman, who says she's been absolutely missing those two. Poemu's mom looks over at Tugo and asks who he is. The second he says his name, she replies that Poemu talks about him all the time, that he's quite the interesting hall monitor. The girls rush over to see what's inside the lunchbox. Mom opens it and a themed lunch with little cartoon characters on everything. Poemu lets out a shriek of pure embarrassment and tells her mom to close it right now. She buries her face in the table, absolutely dying inside. Tugo says she didn't have to be embarrassed because he used to watch that cartoon with his little sister too. But that wasn't even why Poemu was embarrassed. Tugo hadn't caught the actual reason at all. Poemu never cared about the themed lunch. Her mom had always made her bento boxes with her favorite anime and manga characters on them, just to see her smile. And for Tugo, someone as kind and wonderful as Poemu, that adorable little lunchbox made total sense. It fit her perfectly. Another day of school. And of course more chaos going down. Right off the bat, 3 pairs of wide eyes, Poemu, Motoko, and Rui, lock onto quite the sight. We're talking a full-on Gyaru, no joke. Short skirt, midriff out, the whole aesthetic. Exactly the type of girl Tugo would never let slide. But she walked right in, Even the strict, no-nonsense, iron-fisted Tugo folded. Bro, the second-hand embarrassment was real. For Poemu, that was the ultimate disrespect. She was fuming, and she went straight to the hall monitor to demand answers. Like, her skirt is literally a dress code violation, but this girl just waltzes in no problem? What kind of logic is that, bro? Poemu was losing it. She had zero intention of sharing her special exception status with anyone else. She went at Tugo with everything she had. The poor monitor looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Back in the classroom, Poemu's head was still stuck on that mysterious Gyaru. Why would Tugo let her off the hook like that? The curiosity spread to all three girls instantly. They had to find out who this person was. First up for questioning, Izubuchi, who had absolutely no idea who Tugo's mystery friend was. Zero. Nothing. A total blank. Even so, the guy decided to help the girls crack the case. What a saint. Target spotted. Izubuchi took off running after the girl without even thinking. When the girls went after him, he was flat on the ground. He'd eaten it hard. His advice? Stay away from that girl. Rui and Poemu left Motoko with Izubuchi and went after the Gyaru themselves. Through the hallways, Poemu caught a glimpse of the target and immediately lost her. Classic. But Poemu wasn't giving up, sniffing around like a bloodhound. The library. She asked Seichi if anyone had come through. The guy straight up lied to her face, and of course Poemu saw right through it. While she was grilling poor Seichi, the Gyaru walked right past both of them. Bold as you please. Poemu took off running again, her mind spinning, wondering what kind of person could make hall monitors tremble like that. Was she threatening people or something? And then, finally, she found her. The girl was chatting with Tugo. So what exactly were they talking about? Tugo seemed flustered about something, and ended up blurting out loud that the girl was attractive, and that dressing like that was basically criminal. Poemu heard every word. She'd always believed Tugo was a straight-up guy, but now, that stung. She went straight at him, hurt, telling him to stop acting like some player who says the same thing to every girl. And then came the killing blow. The worst thing Poemu could ever say to someone. You are disrupting order and discipline. The Gyaru found the whole thing hilarious and told Poemu to hold on because she wanted to talk to her. No big deal. Chill out. The two of them went to a bubble tea shop, grabbed some boba, and had a chat. Tugo, naturally, kept circling the whole place trying to eavesdrop on them. Loser. The girl started talking about how the students dressed. Sure, looking put together mattered, but she wanted to try something a little sexier. Then she asked Poemu if the miniskirt was about getting guys' attention. Poemu was floored. Of course not. It was just her style, and it was also kinda cute. The girl got it immediately. Dressing that way felt freeing. But Tugo had a tiny point. Guys really do react to it. The mystery girl said her goodbyes without even introducing herself. What a character, honestly. Tugo showed up behind Poemu wanting to talk about her attitude from earlier, but Poemu just wanted to let it go. Fine. Tugo admitted he wouldn't call any girl attractive again. That had been a slip-up. But before anything else, Poemu was the first girl Tugo had ever found attractive, the only person he'd ever genuinely called wonderful. Poemu was embarrassed, but happy. From now on, she'd be the only girl Tugo ever complimented. Period. But then came the question, who was that girl anyway? She participated in school events. Poemu must have seen her before. Oh, that was Nadeshiko, the student council president. No wonder the hall monitors went soft around her. It all makes sense now. At a student council meeting, there was a debate going on about fundraising. The proposal was simple. Stand at the entrance and wait for donations to roll in. Kaoru stood up to push back. Just stand there and wait? They'd barely make anything. Nadeshiko shot back immediately. Scraping together even a little money is actually a ton of work, and a hotshot like him would never understand that. Then she turned to him with a little smile and invited Kaoru to grab some tea with her. Maybe then he'd finally get what's in a girl's heart and stop talking down to them. The message was clear. Everyone give their best and bring in as much money as possible. Let the results do the talking. Kaoru took that as a declaration of war. Nadeshiko clearly wanted to compete. Who was going to raise more? Kaoru and Nadeshiko were known as the beauty and the beast of student council, constantly going head-to-head in legendary battles. The following week, Nadeshiko was hyping up students to make their donations. The three musketeers and the hall monitor showed up with a cheerful good morning. The girl's only real interest was whether Nadeshiko would show up dressed like that again. She looked so good. Nadeshiko shot a loaded look at Tugo. She wanted him to donate. Even though he'd already given earlier, she wasn't letting it slide. He was gonna have to hand over the last coin he had left for lunch. Nadeshiko piled on the pressure hard. Then Izubuchi rolled up, dropped a solid chunk of change, and told her to stop shaking people down. Nadeshiko said she was just messing around, though she really didn't need to destroy Tugo's pride like that. The guy didn't want to hand over his coin, so he asked if he could just help with the fundraising instead. Nadeshiko asked Izubuchi for help, and he couldn't say no. If he did, she'd spill his secret. Classic blackmail. The girls wanted to help too. Poemu, not so much. But that kicked puppy look on Tugo's face was way too convincing to ignore. Nadeshiko was on another level, for real. She always managed to pull people to her side out of nowhere. A genuinely enviable skill. Kaoru tried to rally his own crew, and it went sideways. Nobody wanted to help. Well, except after he promised an air conditioner. After that, nobody said no, obviously. Next up, Seiichi, who absolutely refused to help Nadeshiko, said he couldn't stand that arrogant woman. Oops, she heard everything. Didn't matter if Seiichi became completely useless outside of the library. Drag him along anyway. Both teams hit their stations, giving it their all to bring in donations. And Seiichi, what a plot twist. The library nerd was out here dropping pickup lines on girls who ate it up and donated more cash. Who would have thought? Poemu interrupted his performance to compliment him, but the funniest part was the little library setup he'd built around himself, his natural habitat. Izubuchi brought reinforcements too, a whole crew of delinquents. Like, where does this guy even find these people? Nadeshiko appeared to announce that the in-school hustle was over. Now it was time to hit the streets. Poemu was already dying inside. The audacity. And of course, Kaoru did the same thing. The city fundraising went well on both sides. That night, Kaoru was counting up the money he'd brought in. And yeah, there was no way to count it all right there. His assistant slipped out of the room, embarrassed. Then Kaoru showed his real colors. He stuffed money from his own wallet into the donation box. What's the problem? It was a donation from him, wasn't it? The next day, time to see the results. Kaoru looked completely wrecked, like he hadn't slept at all. According to the numbers, Kaoru had raised more money. That meant he won the battle against Nadeshiko. Nadeshiko smiled and praised his effort, said she was genuinely happy about how much money the school had managed to raise, and that Kaoru had lived up to her expectations. And then it hit him, finally. The whole time, he'd been played by Nadeshiko, a total puppet. The entire competition had been in the palm of her hand. Kaoru had lost. End of the day, time to head home. Nadeshiko showed up with a boba tea to walk with Kaoru. He didn't like it. Too sweet. But Nadeshiko was worried. The night of the fundraiser, she'd seen Kaoru out working in the rain, late into the night. He didn't put money from his own pocket in there for nothing. He wanted to earn it, to actually work for it, to feel what the grind really tasted like. Kaoru took a sip of the tea. It wasn't sweet. Nadeshiko knew Kaoru, knew his taste in everything, since they were little kids through every single battle they'd ever had in their lives. He hadn't won even one. Maybe next time, man. The next day, Tugo starts his morning super early, meditating. He straps on his disciplinary monitor armband, gets everything squared away, and heads out to do his patrol on the holiday. He leaves the house totally zen, the kind of chill that's honestly a little annoying. And as he walks past Poemu's house, he thinks about her with that absolute certainty. She was definitely still in bed. Then, out of nowhere, a girl comes sprinting right past him. And this girl, dude, she looked just like Poemu. Tugo calls out her name without even thinking. The girl stops, turns around, and asks if he was a friend of her older sister's. Welp. Meanwhile, Poemu was completely knocked out in bed, like, completely gone, while her mom was downstairs screaming her name. Breakfast time. Poemu opens one eye, grabs her phone, checks the time, and makes that face. The, "Are you seriously kidding me right now" face. It was way too early, dude. She drags herself downstairs and her mom immediately asks if she's going to change first. Change into what? Poemu doesn't even respond and just keeps shuffling forward, until she opens the kitchen door and gets the biggest shock of her entire life. Ririku sitting there having breakfast with Tugo. Tugo, in her house. What was this guy even doing here? Poemu just freezes in the doorway trying to process the situation, while Ririku, already stirring the pot, casually comments that it was embarrassing to wear a skirt with chubby legs like her sister's. Tugo shuts that down immediately, says Poemu's legs were beautiful. Poemu hears that and, dude, something just short-circuits inside her. She bolts to the bathroom to splash water on her face, completely panicking. When she comes back, she's fuming, demanding to know what Tugo was doing in her house and why Ririku even let him in. But it wasn't Ririku, it was Yume, their mom. She just saw Tugo at the door and invited him in for breakfast like it was the most normal thing in the world because that's just who she is. Before Poemu could go full meltdown on her own mother, Tugo raises his hand and asks her to hold on. He apologizes for walking into her home without being invited, says it wasn't Yume's fault at all. Then he gets up to leave. But the second Poemu says he doesn't have to go, he sits right back down and absolutely destroys that breakfast like he hadn't eaten in a week. Ririku takes the opportunity to poke at her sister, saying Tugo shouldn't leave anyway. And while she's at it, How long was Poemu planning to walk around in her pajamas? So embarrassing, like, come on. Poemu storms off huffing to go change. The three of them end up hanging out in the living room, and Ririko wastes zero time. First question out of her mouth, are they dating? Poemu denies it with every ounce of rage she has in her body. Tugo denies it too, but in that polite, composed way of his, explains that relationships between students were against school rules. Ririko doesn't let it go, obviously. Asks if Tugo would ever be interested in dating someone. Poemu immediately complains. Why does she keep asking such dumb questions? Tugo calmly gives his answer. It wasn't that he had no interest. It's just that right now, school came first. He said it like one of those straight A types who has everything figured out. Ririko turns to Poemu and goes, see, he is interested, so you totally have a shot. Poemu goes off again. So embarrassing. Then Ririko shifts gears. Okay, so what's his type? Poemu's annoyed, but, like, she also kind of wants to know. Tugo pauses, thinks about it, and genuinely admits he's never really thought about it before. He doesn't know. Maybe someone mature, serious, and attractive, but then he backtracks on his own answer. No, wait, he doesn't really expect all that either. He just gets all flustered, in that awkward, nerdy way that's somehow only him. Ririko goes for the final question. What does Tugo think of Poemu? She's not serious, she's not exactly mature, but she's cute, right? Tugo answers without missing a beat. Yeah, he knows. Poemu is adorable, kind, and amazing. Ririko looks genuinely baffled. It made zero sense that these two weren't dating. Like, zero. Poemu was 1 second away from snapping. Tugo steps in and says, sisters shouldn't fight like that. Right on cue, Yume walks in carrying a giant stack of pancakes, saying that it didn't look like it, but deep down those two actually got along great. The pancakes were ridiculously cute, dude. Decorated with the theme from this cartoon called Pretty, the girl's absolute favorite, which made Yume start reminiscing about all the times the three of them watched Pretty together. A show about these sweet magical girls locked in an epic battle where the Pretty team was getting completely wrecked. Poemu and Ririko used to watch with their hearts pounding, desperate to jump through the screen and help. The two of them would grab their pretty sticks to cast their spells. Their mom would just melt watching how adorable they were. She got so caught up in the moment that she literally stood up and screamed in the middle of the movie theater. That was mortifyingly embarrassing for the girls. They wanted to disappear on the spot, but Tugo? He didn't want her going anywhere. He patted the seat next to him and invited Mrs. Yume to sit down. What an actually sweet guy, for real. By the end of the day, Poemu and Tugo are saying their goodbyes outside. He apologizes for staying so late. Poemu says it's really no big deal. She never would have imagined spending a day off like this with Tugo, even if those two had completely drained her patience. On his end, Tugo admits he actually had a great time, that it had been years since he'd hung out at a friend's house like that. Poemu likes hearing that, but plays it off, apologizes for all the chaos and mentions that Tugo got lucky her dad wasn't home. And on top of that, Ririko said way more than she should have. Tugo says he doesn't mind any of it. He has a little sister too. He gets it. He didn't take any of those questions seriously. Poemu did not appreciate that answer. She says goodbye quickly and turns away. Then, just barely under her breath, you could have at least taken it a little seriously, you dork. Tugo turns around. Did you say something? Poemu freezes, thinks fast, says it's nothing and tells him to get out of here. Ririko pops up behind her, still pushing the whole "so are you guys dating or not" agenda. Poemu spins around like something out of a horror movie and goes after her. Ririko takes off running for her life. Meanwhile, Tugo is standing outside his house wondering what exactly Poemu wanted him to take seriously. Because yeah, dude, Tugo heard everything. He's just slow on the pickup. The following evening, Poemu's sitting on a bench snacking on something sweet, thinking about Tugo. If he showed up right now, he'd have a field day roasting her. So cringe. Everyone around her was staring at whatever weird impression she was doing. Poemu looks up and spots Tugo, acting like a complete mess, going from store to store looking for a gift to thank her family. He found the perfect one. At least he thought so. Poemu sneaks up behind him and tells him he didn't need to get anything. Tugo says he wanted to thank them for breakfast and the pancakes. Poemu tells him again he doesn't need to bring anything, especially not a power strip. The two of them sit down on a bench nearby. Poemu breaks it down for him. If Tugo brought her mom a gift, it would just encourage her to cook another mountain of food. Tugo considers this. If Mrs. Yume returned the gesture, he'd return it again. It would become an endless loop. That's exactly the problem. For Poemu, keeping the gratitude internal was more than enough. In that case, Tugo says he'll just stop by in person to say thank you. Poemu's fine with that. How about right now? Absolutely not. Speaking of which, wasn't Tugo supposed to be on patrol? He literally said he couldn't go shopping on the way home, and yet here he was, doing exactly that. Poemu tried to corner him, but no. Tugo had already gone home before heading back out. That made no sense to Poemu whatsoever. Then why was he still wearing the armband? He had it on at her house too. Why? Tugo deflects with a more important question. What was Poemu doing out here in the first place? Breaking rules. But that's classified. They walk together, and Tugo talks about her family. Just amazing, warm people all around. No wonder Poemu was so kind herself. He mentions he'd love to meet her dad next time. Poemu thinks that should never ever happen. Her dad would throw hands with Tugo just for setting foot in the house. He wouldn't stand a chance, like, at all. She kept going, until she glanced to the side and realized she was talking to nobody. Tugo had completely vanished. Okay, so, about Poemu's dad, Kohinata Raimu, 37 years old. Raimu was on his way home after another long day at work, pumped to spend time with his family. Before he had a family, he was a full-on rebellious troublemaker. But now, dedicated family man through and through. Serious dad. His oldest was 16 and in high school. Ririku still in middle school. Both of them had stopped really talking to him. Typical teenage stuff, but it still stung every single time. Raimu knew he had incredible daughters, a solid job, and a great family. No complaints. Life was perfect. Well, almost. Around him, a crowd had gathered for a rap battle, and that was exactly what messed with Raimu's head. Before Yume came into his life, rap was everything to him. He stood there sizing up the battle like the professional he used to be, mentally grading every bar. He had to hold himself back from jumping in. Nothing good would come of it. He had a family waiting at home. Better to walk away. But then something caught his eye. A disciplinary monitor started going off on one of the guys in the battle. Raimu's jaw dropped at the audacity. It was Tugo. The guys clapped back with a fire freestyle aimed right at him. The crowd went crazy. Raimu watched with secondhand embarrassment. This poor kid probably didn't even know he'd just stepped into a rap battle. Then Tugo pauses, thinks, and out of absolutely nowhere drops a bar that had no business being that good. The crowd erupted. Raimu was genuinely shocked. The other guy came back harder. The crowd rode with it. But to Raimu it wasn't all that impressive. Basic. Overplayed. He wanted to see what Tugo would do next. Tugo opens up, compliments the guy, goes straight for the heart, keeps going, says the guy's talent was real, that he could channel that same energy into being an incredible student, floats the idea of starting a rap club at school, says he'd put in the work to make it succeed. That hit deep, like genuinely deep, for everyone standing there. Out of nowhere, someone calls out to Tugo. It was Raimu, giving him props for showing respect in the battle instead of just trying to clown on everybody. Tugo, completely lost, admits he didn't even know it was a rap battle. Raimu extends his hand, challenges Tugo to a battle. Before anything can happen, Poemu comes flying and screaming Tugo's name at full volume. She's heated, like really heated, until Raimu calls her name. Dad? Raimu had that look on his face. That terrifying, ice-cold look of a man fully prepared to make Tugo's life very, very difficult. Another boring school day, and Motoko's got her face planted on the desk, staring at nothing. She's hit with that deep, hollow kind of loneliness. Even food stopped tasting good. No joke. All because she can't stop thinking about the guy she likes. And Poemu has the nerve to say she's lucky, because Tugo is literally right there by the school gate every single day. So Poemu and Rui switch into full matchmaker mode. Both of them are 100% ready to stick their noses in someone else's love life. Zero shame, zero hesitation. The three of them head to the nurse's office together. Izubuchi greets them with that signature attitude of his, going off about how 3 idiots can't just show up without a reason. But Poemu already has a lie locked and loaded. Straight-faced, no hesitation. Motoko twisted her ankle in gym class. The poor girl was already a nervous wreck. And then things went completely off the rails. Time to examine the ankle. Izubuchi starts pressing on her foot, and Motoko is sweating, skin crawling, stomach doing flips the way it does when your crush gets way too close. He asks, with that dead serious expression, whether she actually twisted her foot or if she was just an idiot. But Motoko had something else entirely on her mind. Izubuchi was so close to her foot that he might actually smell it. The sweaty foot smell, dude. She's mentally begging the universe to just let this one slide. But then Izubuchi gives a little reaction, like he noticed something. Did he smell it? The panic hit so hard that Motoko completely lost it, and she straight up kicked him in the chin. The three of them bolt out of there. The embarrassment was astronomical. Motoko ended up actually limping after that whole disaster. Rough day for her. But she wasn't ready to give up just yet. At the very least, she wanted one photo of Izubuchi. Poemu points out that secretly taking pictures of someone is seriously creepy, but like, whatever, right? Motoko finally goes for the perfect shot, and then Tugo pops out of nowhere and ruins everything. She's one bad moment away from a full breakdown over a single photo. Time for another attempt. But this annoying hall monitor just will not move. So Poemu takes matters into her own hands and drop kicks Tugo without a second thought. Except Izubuchi spots the two of them lurking in the corner and comes over to settle the score for that earlier kick, and Rui and Motoko dip out immediately. Rui manages to make one important request before vanishing. She wanted one of those photos because the whole situation was giving major BL vibes, and she is absolutely that kind of fan. By late afternoon, Motoko slumped over with an ice cream cone in her hand. No photo, nothing, just a chin kick to remember the day by. Then some huge dude bumps into her and knocks the ice cream right out of her hand. 3 delinquents immediately roll up, saying she's gonna pay for that. Motoko was so terrified that all she could think about was getting out of there. But the second she took off, her ankle gave out on her for real. Face first into the ground. The troublemakers were still coming after her, and they were scary. Meanwhile, Motoko was internally making peace with every bad thing she'd ever done. But then her savior shows up and grabs her hand. It was Izubuchi. He lets out this absolutely unhinged yell at the guys and scares all 3 of them off just like that, especially since he looked like he walked straight out of a street gang. Then he picks Motoko up and carries her home, and explains that what he had noticed earlier was that she had flat feet, which meant she was always going to be tripping over herself. Motoko turned beet red, but she thanked him and even asked him for one little favor. The next day, she showed up to school absolutely glowing, like suspiciously happy. And yeah, it wasn't a coincidence. She had gotten the perfect photo. Lunch even tasted good again. Over at Poemu's house, the conversation turned to an upcoming visit at their school. Some middle school kids were coming to check the place out, and Ririku, Poemu's little sister, wanted to go to the same high school, so she tagged along for the visit. Their mom got all emotional thinking her daughters just wanted to stick together forever. Ririku shot that down immediately. She said she was only interested because the school was close to home, and the entrance exam looked easy enough, like if Tugo got in. Anyway, the visit was set for Sunday. The problem? Poemu also had to be at school on Sunday for remedial classes. Now she had to pray she wouldn't run into her sister and completely destroy her reputation. At the welcome event, Nadeshiko kicks off the tour. The middle school girls arrive wide-eyed, taking everything in. Ririku slips away from the group under the pretense of going to the bathroom, but she was actually spying on the school's sports club, totally fascinated. Meanwhile, Poemu sneaks into the classroom as carefully as possible. Nobody was there, almost exactly like the first time she'd ended up talking to Tugo. And sure enough, right on cue, he shows up and says hi. Poemu calls out the smile on his face the second he walked in, just trying to tease him, but he answers completely seriously. He knew she'd be there, so he couldn't help smiling. Poemu goes completely soft, trying her absolute hardest to play it cool. But then Motoko and Rui show up out of nowhere for remedial class 2, not even 1 second alone. Ririku's been watching the sports field when a girl walks up and starts talking to her. It felt like it could have been this deep, meaningful moment. But the girl just asked if Ririku went to school there. Nope. Ririku calls her out for being late, but turns out the girl just overslept. The girl starts following Ririku around as she leads her back. Finally introduces herself, Kikuka. Ririku looks at her and says she seems a little slow, but Kikuka says zoning out is totally normal for her. Like getting up early is genuinely hard. Ever since she started school, the one who woke her up every single day was her older brother, super responsible guy, and they'd walk to school together. But once her brother started high school, she started sleeping through her alarm every morning. The obvious fix? Go to the same school as him. Ririku mentions she has an older sister who goes there. Kikuka immediately gets excited and figures, if their siblings could be friends, then the two of them could be friends too. Ririku's not feeling that logic at all. This girl is clearly not all there. Back in the remedial classroom, all 4 of them are complaining about how brutal the semester exams were. Turns out Motoko failed everything, like every single class. Then Rui turns to Tugo and says she always figured he'd be the type to coast through without trying. Motoko gets an idea right after. What if everyone went over to Poemu's house to study together? Poemu fires back instantly. How is a study group supposed to work when everyone in it is failing? Rui asks Tugo if he'd be down to visit Poemu's place. He says absolutely, that he'd already been there before and had such a good time he didn't even notice how late it got. Poemu's nerves are hanging by a thread. The girls want details immediately. Tugo starts telling the story of how he met her dad and everything, but he said way too much. Poemu hits him with a solid punch. She looks around asking when the teacher is getting there, and spots Seiichi sitting there quietly, mentioning he'd been there for a while. When questioned about the remedial class, he makes it very clear he's not in the same boat as the rest of them. That was enough to make Poemu want to disappear into the floor. Tugo steps in, and Seiichi snaps back into his polished, composed self instantly. He explains he's there for the open house event. They asked him to give the visiting students a tour of the library. He drops off an assignment for the four of them and heads out. In the library, Seiichi was presenting the space with that flawless, picture-perfect aura of his. The visiting students were completely starstruck. But the second the visitors say their goodbyes and leave, Seiichi takes one step forward and drops the act entirely, complaining about having to work on a Sunday, grumbling the whole way. Ririko and Kikuka end up standing right in front of him. Awkward eye contact all around. Seiichi takes a step back and switches the persona back on. The two girls are left standing there, speechless, like, were they hallucinating? Kikuka wants to go into the library. Ririko absolutely refuses to be anywhere near someone that weird. Back in the remedial room, Rui's venting about how bizarre the monitors at this school are. And speaking of which, Izubuchi appears in the doorway asking if anyone got hurt. He sees the coast is clear but explains he's on duty to look after any kids who might hurt themselves at the event. Poemu asks why he isn't just in the nurse's office. Not happening. According to Izubuchi, middle school kids are hitting the ground at any given moment. Speaking from personal experience, apparently. Ririko and Kikuka finally catch up with the rest of their group and take off running. But one of them crashes right into Izubuchi, and he immediately snaps. Tells them both to stop running in the halls. Ririko is shook. Like, is there a delinquent just loose in this school? The two of them are about to bounce when Izubuchi grabs Kikuka to check if she's hurt. Ririko is not having it. Kikuka tells her to chill out. The guy is on the health committee. But Ririko doesn't care, grabs Kikuka and drags her out of there. The two of them end up wandering the whole school together. And honestly, by the end of it, they're kind of having a blast. Meanwhile, the remedial crew had wrapped up their assignment. Rui asks Tugo to walk Poemu to the gate. Adorable. The two of them make their way through the school, but Poemu is on full alert, scanning every corner, desperate not to be spotted by her sister. If Ririko saw her coming out of a remedial class, Poemu's whole image would be toast. Tugo then casually mentions that his sister was also there today. Ririko and Kikuka are walking together, talking about the little adventure they just had. Kikuka says the school was amazing, just like her brother had told her. A serious and kind guy who barely ever smiles. But ever since starting high school, he comes home every single day grinning and saying how much fun he had, and that he'd made friends with a girl who had the cutest name. That's why Kikuka wanted to see the school for herself. Ririko, for her part, came because of the track and field program, which is absolutely elite. She really wanted to be part of it. The two of them shake hands and make a promise to be best friends when they meet again in high school. Tugo and Poemu are walking down the hallway, and they spot both girls inside a room, caught. The two of them keep walking. They talk about the younger sisters they each have. And then Tugo says that remedial class was fun, but honestly a little disappointing, because he had imagined it would just be the two of them. A wave of emotion crashes over Poemu all at once. She goes completely red, and gives Tugo the softest little punch on the back. Summer arrived. So how about a little free time together, huh? Class was finally over, so Poemu called out to Rui to head home together, since Motoko had already bolted out the door like a maniac chasing an ice cream deal. But Rui couldn't leave just yet. She still had to stop by the manga club. Poemu lit up at that. When they were kids, the two of them used to draw the pretty girls together, and a huge wave of nostalgia hit her all at once. Since walking home alone sounded like a total drag, Poemu asked if she could tag along to the club activities. The mood shifted a little. Rui asked if Poemu was really sure about this, but fine. She'd kind of been expecting this moment to come eventually. At the door of the club room, Rui paused before going in, just to confirm one thing, whether Poemu knew what BL was. Poemu was completely thrown off by the question, like what? But she did know it involved a relationship between two guys, and that was enough, because that was basically the whole vibe of the manga club. Alright, time to head in. When they opened the door, the girls in the club looked like they were in some kind of emergency summit deciding the fate of the world. The energy in that room was heavy, but the club president, Chuno, greeted Rui by telling her she was late and that everyone had been waiting. Rui apologized and introduced her friend who was curious about the club. The girls started whispering about Poemu, full of suspicion. After all, her reputation wasn't exactly spotless around there. All that pressure was seriously uncomfortable. Chuno shut everyone up, said Poemu was absolutely welcome in the club, and introduced herself. As they went to sit down, Poemu nudged Rui. This was way too awkward. Maybe it'd be better to just leave. Rui told her it was too late for second thoughts. Best bet was to sit down and keep quiet. The president explained that it was a pleasure to have someone from outside come appreciate the club's work, but that unfortunately, today was not a production day. The club had a tradition of publishing their manga anthology, Years of Love, in the summer and winter. So it was time to decide which works would make it into the next edition. Almost everything had already been submitted, except for Rui's piece. Rui apologized for the delay and handed out copies for review. It had been a rough one to create, no joke, but she'd found her inspiration from a photo Motoko had taken of two of their classmates. Poemu felt a knot in her stomach about what she was about to see, because Rui had written a BL about Izubuchi and Tugo. And just like that, it was finally time to check out the manga. The school was being torn apart by monitors from the underworld. They wanted to take over from the surface monitors because, obviously, running a school takes power. Everyone was going all out in the battle. The health committee monitor rose to his feet, standing beside the disciplinary monitor, while the underworld guys just hung back watching, not even caring about the students trapped inside the school. Izubuchi couldn't help them right now. He had a fight to win. Dude dropped his lab coat on the ground and it caused an absolute legendary explosion of destruction. That lab coat weighed a ton. The imposters freaked out. Tugo also stepped up, ripping off his armband in one swift motion, unleashing the power that had been sealed inside. The underworld imposter shook at that raw force. It was even stronger than his own. The two monitors got ready for an absolutely epic showdown. Back in reality, Chuno was completely losing it over that emotional story, and so were all the other girls. Poemu was the only one who had no idea what was going on. Like, where was the BL in any of that? Poemu asked where exactly the BL part was supposed to be. Chuno went full meltdown mode. Like, she couldn't believe Poemu expected a masterpiece BL to just be handed to her on a silver platter. Rui explained that BL isn't something you create, it's something you find. Chuno shouted that even if the characters had girlfriends and it was just a regular action manga, all of it sent Poemu's brain into full-on chaos. That was way too much for her to handle. So Poemu finally stepped out of the room to head home, still completely shaken by everything she just witnessed. Back at home, Poemu was a total wreck. She stood by the front door waiting for her guests. And no, telling her she was overreacting wasn't going to help. The doorbell finally rang. The girls and Tugo were there to study. Poemu's mom said hi to everyone, and Tugo thanked her for having them over, handing her a little gift. Finally up in Poemu's room, Motoko immediately flung herself onto the bed like she owned the place. Tugo said Poemu's room was cute, pretty, and also couldn't even finish. Got punched. There was exactly 1 week left until exams, and just as they'd planned, they were studying at Poemu's place. In the middle of studying, Motoko started gushing about how pumped she was for summer break. She wanted to hit the beach or find a pool. Tugo was hyped for it too. It had been forever since he'd been to the beach, so they better study hard so everyone could actually go. But Rui dropped the truth bomb that everyone already knew Tugo just wanted to see Poemu in a bikini. Motoko immediately suggested they go bikini shopping and find something super cute and a little spicy for Poemu. Tugo said that was totally uncalled for. Like, there was zero reason for that, since Poemu looked gorgeous no matter what she wore. Poemu turned absolutely beet red. Rui threw out the idea of inviting Izubuchi too. Great idea. But that sent Motoko into a complete spiral. The three girls were in full chaos mode while Tugo just kept begging everyone to focus and study, except they weren't exactly feeling that energy. So if that's how it was going to be, Tugo got up and left Poemu's house. Poemu wasn't having it. She ran after him. Tugo explained himself. It made more sense to study alone and actually focus, because there was no way he could afford to tank his grades. If that happened, he'd have to cancel the beach trip with everyone. And that was his own rule he'd set for himself. That hit Poemu hard, because she knew that if Tugo studied alone, he wasn't going to do well. Did he actually not want to go on the trip? Poemu demanded he just come out and say what was really going on, but of course that wasn't it. Tugo couldn't wait to be at the beach with everyone. The next day, Tugo went looking for Izubuchi for help, because deep down he knew he absolutely could not study by himself. Seiichi was listening to the whole thing from around the corner. Izubuchi tried to explain the material to Tugo, but he was terrible at teaching. Seiichi let out a laugh at the whole mess. Izubuchi snapped at Four Eyes for being such a smug jerk about it. But Seiichi's grades really were insanely good, and he made sure everyone knew it. Maybe, just maybe, if Izubuchi got down on his knees and begged, Seiichi might actually teach him something. Izubuchi told him to drop dead. Back at Poemu's place, her parents were chatting about the study group that kept coming over. Raimu was secretly hoping there were no boys in the mix. But nope, it was all girls. The next day, Seiichi spotted Tugo studying by himself since Izubuchi was busy. He took one long look at this hopeless guy, and then just sat down and started helping him. No begging required. The days kept ticking by, getting closer and closer to exam week. Finally, the results were out. Tugo ran straight to Poemu, slapped his test papers down on her desk, and he hadn't failed a single thing. They were going to the beach together. And even better, nobody failed anything. Seiichi was leaning against the wall outside until Poemu came out to thank him. Because it was her who had asked Seiichi to help Tugo in the first place, so why not invite Seiichi to come along too? He couldn't exactly say no. He was going whether he liked it or not. Summer break was finally here. The three girls headed out to a bikini shop. Motoko was more hyped than ever. For the first time in her life, she hadn't bombed a single exam. They were ready to find the most amazing bikinis, but Poemu wasn't too fussed about it. Was it because Tugo had said she looked gorgeous no matter what? Motoko was spiraling with no idea whether Izubuchi would prefer something cute or something sexy. It was an all-out battle to find the perfect swimsuit. Motoko wasn't fighting this war alone though. All three of them were going in. Poemu stared at the racks trying to figure out what to pick. She leaned toward something cute, but then she thought about Tugo, and that weird fluttery feeling hit her out of nowhere. She tried to shake off that random thought, but she made up her mind. She was going to put in the effort, because Tugo was going to see her. Rui popped up being a little gremlin pointing at a super bold bikini. Motoko went for the mannequin, wondering if Izubuchi would like it, but that was way too much for a high schooler. Out of nowhere, Nadeshiko walked out of the dressing room wearing that exact bikini. The girls were shook by how absolutely stunning she looked. She was there picking out a bikini too. She was heading to a summer house that vacation. Nadeshiko had only ever worn the school's swim team one piece, until she tried on something bold for the first time and got completely sucked into fashion. The girls tried to show Motoko that bikinis choose their person. She wasn't even in the same league as that figure. Motoko begged Nadeshiko to try on more bikinis. She looked incredible in every single one. They even started snapping pics. They went full photo shoot mode, trying on tons of different styles, and Nadeshiko became a model on the spot. The four of them headed out with their bags sometime in the late afternoon. After having so much fun watching Nadeshiko absolutely slay in bikini after bikini, she thanked the three of them for the best time and invited them to come to her summer house the following week. It'd be way more fun with those girls around, and they could bring the guys too. Just like that, the whole plan flipped. Forget the beach trip, they were going to a summer house. Poemu was all packed and ready for the beach house trip, bags zipped, hype through the roof, and then the doorbell rang. It was Tugo, waiting for her right outside. The two of them walked to the train station together, and honestly, that trip turned out to be a way bigger deal than Tugo ever expected. He never imagined a simple little outing would turn into a full-blown vacation adventure. But Poemu wasn't about to pass up an invite like that, obviously. So she immediately started messing with Tugo, asking if it wasn't against the rules for boys and girls to be staying at the same beach house together. Tugo answered with the most wholesome, oblivious energy imaginable. Neither he nor anyone else had any impure thoughts. That said, as the disciplinary monitor, he wasn't about to let anyone share a room with someone of the opposite sex after 8, and lights out at 10. No exceptions. When they got to the station, the rest of the crew was already there. Izubuchi and Seiichi had showed up too. Izubuchi was only there because he had nothing better to do. And since they were going to the beach, he brought a bat to split watermelons. Honestly looked more like he was ready to split some skulls. Seiichi didn't waste any time and immediately started roasting Izubuchi, saying the guy was way too hyped for the trip. That sent Izubuchi through the roof. Now Seiichi was definitely not getting any watermelon. Tugo, certified peacekeeper, stepped in before Izubuchi turned Seiichi's head into an actual watermelon. These three idiots are genuinely exhausting, like, for real. So the girls turned around and pretended they didn't know any of them. Anyway, everyone got on the train. Izubuchi immediately made it clear he wasn't paying for anything, because his wallet was absolutely empty. Seiichi said that was no problem. Izubuchi could just act like a delinquent and shake somebody down in the car. After a little while, they could finally see the ocean through the window. Everyone lost it with excitement, except for Seiichi, resident buzzkill, and Tugo, of course. Tugo was already stressing out, because this coastline was known for public order issues, and the disciplinary monitor could not just stand around doing nothing. In the end, they found Nadeshiko waiting for them. Izubuchi showed up immediately complaining about her being there, but whatever. Poemu just hadn't mentioned ahead of time that Nadeshiko was the one who sent the invite, because she knew perfectly well the guys would have bailed on the spot. Nadeshiko then explained that everyone needed to behave themselves, since the beach house belonged to someone else. The girls immediately got suspicious that this someone else was a guy. Rui was already picturing some rich, gorgeous friend of Nadeshiko's. Izubuchi tried to shut that fantasy down right away. Knowing Nadeshiko, her friend was probably just as much of a gorilla as she was, just the male version. Anyway, food was prepared. Simple, good stuff to fill everybody up. They finally made it to the beach, and that's when it was time to meet Nadeshiko's mystery friend, Kaoru. Everyone was kind of underwhelmed. Kaoru, on the other hand, was still trying to figure out who on earth this whole crew behind Nadeshiko even was. She hadn't said a single word. She just told him she wanted a barbecue for 8 people. He should have used his brain. When Kaoru found out everyone was staying at his beach house, he immediately started laying down the rules. Isn't it against the rules for men and women to stay in the same house? He pointed at Tugo, demanding an explanation from the disciplinary monitor. Tugo gave the same answer as before. Nobody there had any impure thoughts, and the 2 little rules applied to everyone. Motoko wanted answers from Kaoru too, since he'd been alone with Nadeshiko this whole time. The other 2 jumped in, teasing them both, saying that their whole rivalry at school was just a cover for how close they actually were. Then, Nadeshiko dropped the bomb. She announced the 2 of them were actually engaged. Just kidding. Kaoru said he would never be in a relationship with a woman like Nadeshiko, and that went for everyone else too. Just look at that trio of total losers. Nadeshiko apologized to Kaoru for bringing everyone over without his permission, but if he didn't cooperate, the whole group would have to sleep outside. He was the only one who could help. That was straight up extortion, but Kaoru totally fell for it. Now everyone could have fun. First one to bounce was Izubuchi, off to find a watermelon obviously. Kaoru tried to say something but couldn't after everyone started hyping him up for how generous he was. Meanwhile, Ririku was out on her morning run, until she turned a corner and bumped right into someone. It was Kikuka. The 2 of them were thrilled to run into each other, went to grab drinks and sat down to catch up. Kikuka started. My brother talks about Pudding-san so much. I never expected it to be your sister. Ririku didn't even bother correcting Poemu's name. Pudding was honestly kind of perfect. The 2 of them made plans to hang out again and explore together since they were both on break. Ririku asked for Kikuka's contact, but she didn't even have a cell phone. She could give out her home number though. And just like that, without Tugo or Poemu having any idea, their little sisters had gotten pretty close. Back at the beach, 3 noticeably older guys were trying to get the girls to come play with them, because it's more fun with girls, right? They shut it down immediately and told the guys to get lost. But the guys kept pushing, until Tugo stepped in, saying they couldn't force the girls to do anything. Tugo alone didn't exactly strike fear into anyone, like, 0. But the delinquent-looking dude and the absolute tank standing next to him were a completely different story. The guys bounced real quick. Kaoru shouted over to Tugo saying he respected how Tugo stayed in disciplinary monitor mode even on vacation. Motoko was all huddled up, thanking Izubuchi. He put his hand on her head and told her to stop being such a scatterbrain. She always ended up in situations like this. Today was definitely the day Motoko was going all in with Tugo. Golden opportunity. And on top of that, her one shot at getting a photo of Izubuchi without his shirt on. Seiichi was peacefully reading his books when 2 girls came up and asked why on earth someone would read at the beach. So Seiichi revealed a secret. He was descended from vampires and would vanish if he exposed himself to sunlight. That's why he stayed hidden in the shade. The girls laughed at the story and invited Seiichi to hang out at a beach shack, but then he dropped his book. His true form as a complete and total nerd was revealed. The girls ran for their lives. Poemu, Rui, and Motoko were ready to get in the water when Izubuchi stopped them. No jumping in without stretching first. Way too dangerous. Then Kaoru showed up with a pile of sunscreen and actually bragged about it, saying that should really be the health monitor's job. The 2 of them started going back and forth right there in front of everyone. Nadeshiko cut through all of it and asked Kaoru for a little help with the sunscreen, but he was completely heartless about it. Even if they were childhood friends, how does someone ignore a girl that pretty in a swimsuit? Kaoru said they were childhood rivals, that he didn't think Nadeshiko was pretty at all, and that she had the face of a steamed bun. The girls didn't get it. A steamed bun? Was Kaoru blind? Nadeshiko cleared it up by pulling out an old photo. And honestly, yeah, it really did look like a steamed bun, but apparently Kaoru still saw her that way. Motoko put it all together in 1 second. All you had to do was gain weight and then lose it again. Kaoru grumbled that he'd never seen Nadeshiko as a woman, so she excused herself to go take care of something. Time passed, everyone enjoying the beach until they decided to mess around in the sand. Kaoru kept glancing over, wondering if Nadeshiko was taking so long because he'd actually hurt her feelings. Then she appeared, calling out Kaoru's name, and he was completely stunned. He just couldn't figure out who this super attractive woman in front of him was. The whole group noticed. Nadeshiko had gone full Gyaru. Things had just gotten very interesting. Kaoru asked who she was and why she wanted to sit next to him. Nadeshiko said she'd taken an interest in his physique. She knew exactly where she'd touch him. Rui and Motoko read the situation instantly. Since Kaoru had said he didn't see Nadeshiko as a woman, she'd come back looking completely different and way more feminine to push him right to his limit. The 2 of them sat down together. The tension was thick, and Kaoru's heart was going absolutely crazy. But Nadeshiko had no idea how to actually act like a seductive woman. She was the exact same personality as always. Kaoru was definitely going to figure it out. Except he didn't. Apparently bold, confident women were totally Kaoru's type. Nadeshiko asked who he'd come to the beach with. He said someone he'd known for a long time and a bunch of loser teenagers. Nadeshiko leaned into the physical contact and then asked if there wasn't any woman around who he was actually interested in. He said no, there was nobody. Nadeshiko pushed. For real? Not a single one of the people who came with you? Like a childhood friend? Kaoru said that childhood friend was everything, except a woman. She was rough, bossy, and violent. Basically a straight-up female gorilla. Back in middle school, she had single-handedly taken down an entire gang from a rival school. Definitely not feminine in the slightest. The kind of girl who sits with her legs spread wide and doesn't care one bit. But then, Kaoru said that, because of all that, Nadeshiko was an incredible opponent. He'd never managed to beat her at anything. Sports, fighting, academics, student council. She'd been his rival for as long as he could remember. And because of that, he felt like it was worth spending his whole life going up against her. Nadeshiko understood everything in an instant and hugged Kaoru. She told him it wasn't about being a man or a woman. They were equals. Kaoru was completely losing it. A beautiful woman, long lashes, strong eyebrows, a soft and captivating voice, a graceful figure. But then he noticed something. At first glance, it seemed like a delicate, soft body, but he could feel the muscle underneath. Very familiar. He kept trying to figure out where he knew that from. Nadeshiko tensed up, asking why he was looking at her like that, and called him a total creep. Kaoru's brain short-circuited. He'd never met a woman so strong and beautiful at the same time. Could it be that he was feeling love? By the time late afternoon rolled around, Kaoru finally woke up from passing out. Everyone was getting ready to head back to the house to eat watermelon, since they hadn't managed to split any at the beach. Kaoru walked along, kicking himself for not asking that woman's name. Would he ever see her again? And Seiichi? Still out there, abandoned as always, mentally narrating this cliché ending, like it was the last page of a light novel. The view from the vacation house was straight up cinematic, the entire city lights reflecting off the ocean right in front of them. Motoko felt like she owned the world, holding that little glass of grape juice, pretending it was wine. Totally her thing, right? That fantasy lasted exactly until Poemu's well-aimed slap snapped Motoko back to reality. Kaoru had hit his limit with that whole pack of chatterboxes. He told everyone to shut up and have at least a shred of common decency. Nadeshiko agreed instantly. Showing gratitude to the owner of the house was like the bare minimum. The girls then surrounded Kaoru, showering the great gentleman with compliments about the beautiful house. But flattery wasn't going to cut it. Kaoru still found those girls just as annoying as ever. The other monitors were kicked back, eating and watching TV without a care in the world. Meanwhile, the girls were giving Kaoru grief for not taking advantage of having 3 gorgeous girls fawning over him. But to him, the only girl worth calling gorgeous was one, that woman from the beach. Nadeshiko, in other words. The very same Nadeshiko was calling out to Kaoru, who was standing there, completely zoned out thinking about her. Nadeshiko then showed up offering him a watermelon, completely destroyed. Her own special way of saying thank you. Izubuchi tried to wrap his head around how that gorilla had demolished a watermelon that even he hadn't been able to crack open. She just gave it one smack and the fruit turned to mush. Izubuchi refused to eat it. He was the one who wanted to smash things, not Nadeshiko. Nadeshiko asked Kaoru about the pretty girl from the beach. He shut it down immediately. None of anyone's business, and Nadeshiko wasn't even in the same league as a woman like that. Poor guy had no idea what the truth actually was. That's when Tugo realized it was already 8 o'clock. Time for the boys and girls to split up. And the next day, everyone was heading to Enoshima. Nobody wanted to hear about that lame rule Tugo had made up. Kaoru just wanted everyone to shut their mouths for once. It was getting late when Poemu appeared outside, taking in the ocean all by herself. Tugo showed up almost immediately. His disciplinary instincts always fired off whenever someone was out of place. But what was Poemu doing out there at that hour? She simply couldn't sleep and decided to take a walk. Tugo got it, but still pointed out it wasn't safe for a girl to be alone at night. So there was no way around it. He was gonna walk with Poemu. It'd be quick. The two of them walked through that beautiful night, replaying the day, when Seiichi got ditched on the sand. What a scene! Hilarious! But nothing topped Nadeshiko's prank on Kaoru. The gag hit so hard the guy literally passed out. Tugo almost felt bad for him. Poemu disagreed immediately. A guy that arrogant didn't deserve anyone's sympathy. He always found a way to put the girls down. But then Poemu admitted that compared to Kaoru, the girls really were nothing. Tugo pushed back on that right away. That was a lie. To him, all 3 of them were amazing. Poemu gave him a little punch. She knew he was going to say that, but to Tugo it was more than just words. And that sparked a funny memory in Poemu's head. When she and the girls went shopping for bikinis, they made a bet, like a little dare, about how Tugo would react to her bikini. Except he hadn't said anything, so Poemu went ahead and told him. And yeah, Tugo hadn't said a word, but the moment he saw her, a whole storm of emotions started boiling up inside him. There wasn't a word in any language that could describe what Tugo felt in that moment. Poemu gave him another little punch, then stepped back, turned around with a small smile, and called Tugo a dork. And again, he saw something in her that he just couldn't put into words. She started talking about the time the two of them had walked home together and had that conversation. Back then, Poemu never imagined the two of them would have anything to talk about, but they ended up getting close, really close. Poemu had never hung out one-on-one with a guy before. That caught Tugo off guard. She seemed like the type who got along with everyone, regardless of gender. But reality was pretty different. Every guy she'd ever known was some idiot who made fun of her name. Unlike Tugo, he thought Poemu's name was adorable. Maybe that's what brought them together. She was the first girl who'd ever gotten that close to Tugo, outside of his mom and sister. He figured it was his own personality that kept people away. It just took him a while to realize that. Things changed when Poemu and the girls decided to stick around. They invited him to get tea, to study for exams, and now this trip. People worth holding on to, tucked away safely in his heart. Poemu got all flustered, not even sure what to say. Then she pointed to the bridge up ahead. That was the one that led to Enoshima. But neither of them had even noticed how far they'd walked. They were practically there. It was both their first time there, and they didn't even know if you could get in at night. Poemu then mentioned a certain shrine in Enoshima, one that was said to strengthen the bond between couples. Tugo thought that was cool, and right away said they should go with everyone the next day. But that wasn't really what Poemu had in mind. She wanted to go right now, just her and Tugo. He didn't think that was right, and started searching for a gentle way to say so. Poemu squirmed, trying to find the courage to say something more. But she ended up turning around and saying it was just a joke, that she didn't even know how to get in, and that it'd be way more fun with the whole group anyway. Tugo felt a tightness in his chest, a sharp tension, again, but he couldn't figure out where that feeling was coming from, like this nagging sense that he'd done something wrong. The next day, the bridge was packed. The weather was gorgeous, perfect for visiting Enoshima. Nadeshiko knew the place like the back of her hand. She could take everyone wherever they wanted. Kaoru still had his head stuck on that woman from the beach, and Tugo showed up with bags under his eyes and that heavy feeling still sitting in his chest. He'd spent the night in a serious internal meeting with himself, trying to figure out what he'd done wrong, and he found his answer. When he turned down Poemu's request, it was the right call for a disciplinary monitor, sure, but that fake smile she'd put on to play it off had hit Tugo square in the heart. The pain was like a watermelon getting smashed, and he kept asking himself how he'd completely failed to understand what Poemu was feeling. I mean, she was just sad about not getting to visit the shrine first. That was obvious. That was the grand conclusion reached at the internal Tugo summit. He went up to Poemu to apologize about the night before. She elbowed him and told him to drop that embarrassing subject. It was nothing, forget about it. Izubuchi showed up right after, commenting on Tugo's wrecked face, looking like he hadn't slept at all. Tugo explained that he spent the whole night thinking about stuff, so sleep never came. Izubuchi pointed out that something like that could mess with his health, so Tugo went off to pull himself together. Meanwhile, the girls were having a blast browsing through all the little shops. Cute snacks, weird snacks, and birds stealing food right out of Seiichi's hands without a shred of remorse. And then, finally, they reached the shrine, where 3 sister goddesses were enshrined, drawing luck, health, love, and so much more. Kaoru was quick to point out that the place also broke up bad relationships, though he didn't actually believe that himself. After all, his toxically classic dynamic with Nadeshiko had somehow survived over a decade. The girls photographed everything, until they spotted an absolutely brutal staircase. Climbing all that was going to be a serious sacrifice, but to everyone's relief, there was an escalator that took you to the top in 5 minutes. Seiichi was already sprinting toward the line. No one was going to let him. A young guy like him couldn't just surrender to technology like that. Seiichi thought it was completely ridiculous to take the hard way for no reason at all. Then Motoko spotted a little corner packed with votive plaques. Nadeshiko explained, it was the union tree. People hung those plaques around the tree to wish for luck and love, a sacred spot for strengthening relationships. All you had to do was write your name and the name of the person you cared about inside a heart. But it took guts, and all the guts in the world belonged to Motoko. She went right ahead and wrote her name alongside Izubuchi's. The heroic act didn't last long though. She shoved the plaque behind all the others in the same breath. Nadeshiko leaned over to peek at the plaque Kaoru was filling out. He tried to hide it, but she caught enough. It was the girl from the beach. Nadeshiko told him he was hopeless. Whenever she felt like it, she'd let Kaoru see that woman again. Tugo was pretty sure this was the exact spot Poemu had wanted to visit, so she was into someone, huh? Tugo figured he was too close to her to be the one she liked. So, like a good friend, he was going to help her get closer to whatever guy she had feelings for. But the moment he made that decision, the tightness in his chest came back. He brushed it off, walked over to Poemu to see what she'd written. The ache wouldn't leave. Poemu handed the plaque to Tugo. It only had her own name on it. They say that brings luck in future relationships. Tugo felt this strange mix of relief and disappointment hit him all at once. Rui and Motoko called out to the two of them. They were heading out. Walking along the path, Tugo kept turning things over in his head. He really had done something wrong, because that smile of Poemu's, it came with sadness behind it. He just had no idea what to do with that. He'd always been this way. He never understood what people were feeling. Then, out of nowhere, a memory played through his mind like a movie. Some kids calling out to Tugo to come buy a limited edition game with them, but he said no. School rule, no detours on the way home. The kids went without him. They didn't even care whether he'd tell on them. Tugo snapped back to reality. Poemu explained that since Seichi was completely done walking, they'd stopped at a diner, and the moment Tugo finished eating, he crashed, like full-on passed out. She offered him a little water. Poemu hadn't slept great either. But anyway, the whole group had gone to check out a cave, and the two of them could wait there or go catch up. Tugo started telling her about the dream he'd just had, when he turned down going with his friends, and that moment brought back the look on his friend's face, and his chest ached. Poemu was leaning in close, trying to follow along. She jumped when Tugo suddenly spoke up. But all of it was to say one thing. What he'd actually wanted was to go with them. And that's when Tugo made up his mind. He was going back to the shrine with Poemu, because when he never told his friend what he actually wanted, the two of them drifted apart, and he didn't want that to happen with her. So he just came out and said it. Last night he had wanted to go to the shrine too, just the two of them. Poemu turned completely red, hiding her flushed face behind her hands. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Tugo went to grab a plaque, and then asked Poemu what she thought about writing her name alongside his. Poemu practically choked. She said absolutely not. It wasn't like they were dating or anything, but that didn't mean she didn't want that. Tugo wasn't sure if this was the right moment to say what he was feeling. Poemu told him to just say it already, so he did, all at once. He was in love with her. The moment Tugo confessed his feelings to Poemu, her reaction was no reaction at all, and somehow even she couldn't believe it. Poemu is at home. It's super early when she gets up, and her mom's already in the kitchen making breakfast, pointing out that her daughter has been waking up earlier ever since she got back from the trip. 3 days have gone by since she came home, which means 3 days have gone by since Tugo's confession. Poemu genuinely cannot wrap her head around how she hasn't heard a single word from Tugo in all that time. After confessing, the guy acted like absolutely nothing happened, completely unfazed, just dropped the whole thing and walked away. Meanwhile, Poemu could barely string 2 words together with her heart pounding out of her chest. She keeps asking herself how a guy just confesses and then acts like it never happened. Like, what even is that? After breakfast, Poemu stood at the front door, just kind of lingering. That's when Tugo showed up, doing his usual early morning patrol like clockwork. Since he'd missed 2 days because of the trip, he needed to make up for lost time. Poemu was already fuming. He considers that lost time, so the two of them ended up doing the patrol together. The day was blazing hot and sunny. Speaking of sunny days, Poemu tried to bring up the trip, but Tugo didn't even let her get started. He was already rushing off to go after some guys causing trouble on the street. He came back, cool as ever, and said he just can't help himself when he sees someone breaking the rules. They started walking again, and Poemu tried to bring up the trip again. Tugo cut her off, said it was a really fun trip with friends, and that Enoshima was awesome. Poemu was absolutely seething, with no idea how to even steer the conversation where she needed it to go. But maybe things could play out like in those K-dramas, right? Where after a confession, the next step is deciding whether you're officially a couple. Nobody had ever confessed to Poemu before. She didn't even know if that's how it was supposed to work. She circled back to Enoshima, but Tugo cut her off again, this time to go argue with some guy who was just minding his own business smoking. Poor dude, just wanted to be left alone. That's when something clicked for Poemu. One important little detail. Tugo was the one who confessed to her, which meant nothing about any of this was normal. The two stopped in the shade. Tugo had overdone it a little on the patrol, was complaining pretty hard about the heat, and went off to grab some drinks. But the heat wasn't the only thing getting to Poemu. She just wanted to understand how he could act so completely unbothered. Then a thought crept in. Maybe Tugo had meant he liked her as a friend, nothing more. And honestly, that was so on brand for an oblivious hall monitor type. It made total sense. Poemu was the only one frustrated. Maybe she was the one who wanted something more. Tugo came back with the drinks and asked if she was okay. It was painfully obvious she was upset. He sat down next to her, complaining about the heat again. Poemu watched him, trying to sort through her own feelings, still not totally sure whether she liked him or not. Was it because Tugo never made fun of her name? Because he was always complimenting her? Not exactly. She still couldn't quite put her finger on it. Tugo wiped his face with a cloth and complained about the heat one more time, but that complaint was starting to feel suspicious. And then Poemu figured it out. It wasn't the heat. It was embarrassment. She asked if something was wrong, and what she got back was the observation that his face was tomato red. Tugo insisted it was just the heat, that it was really hot out. He dropped the act a few seconds later. Tugo came clean. He admitted he always figured he'd handle moments like this like a pro, but that was before he was the one living through it. He told Poemu he had no idea he'd be this much of a nervous wreck just from being around the girl he liked. The heart man, full of surprises. Ever since the day he confessed, he just couldn't keep it together whenever she was around. Of everything he said, what surprised Poemu most was that Tugo was acting like a normal person. She never expected that from someone so weird, and she told him so, straight to his face. But setting that aside, she felt a huge wave of relief wash over her, just from finally having things make sense in her head. She stood up, said in a steady, clear voice that she liked him too, and went ahead and skipped a step, asking him out first. She didn't even give Tugo a chance for a dramatic pause, practically growled at him to just answer. Tugo said he was so grateful, that he was genuinely happy, so happy. He couldn't even find the words. How could you not be over the moon when the person you love feels the same way? Poemu and Tugo sealed the deal with a firm handshake. He thought that was completely normal. She thought it was deeply, profoundly weird. But now Tugo needed a phone. How were they supposed to be in a relationship with no way to text each other? It was already late at night when Ririku got a call from Kikuka. She'd gotten a phone. She was so excited. Picking out a phone is genuinely a whole ordeal, and part of the reason might be that Kikuka went to the store with Tugo, who needed to be absolutely 100% certain before making any decisions. The guy spent 8 hours talking to the sales rep. The poor dude was stuck with Tugo from practically the moment his shift started to the moment it ended, trying to convince him of something. Kikuka mentioned it was really out of nowhere for her brother to just up and decide to get a phone. Ririku caught on immediately, and just like that, she and Kikuka made a little agreement. The next day, Poemu headed out for her daily walk. Ririku was already locked in, full investigation mode. The couple had absolutely no idea there was a little gremlin tailing them. Ririku had a strong suspicion those two were dating. Poemu had been acting super weird lately, as if the two spies weren't acting pretty weird themselves. They kept watching. The couple stopped to rest in a park. Ririku thought that was the most budget choice imaginable. They could have at least gone to a cafe. Kikuka, on the other hand, thought it was a perfect spot because of the gentle breeze. Poemu was going to teach Tugo how to use his phone. He'd spent the whole night trying to figure it out, gave up, and called it. Didn't even take the thing out of the box. Kikuka had told her brother to at least turn it on, but he said it's dangerous to power on a device without reading the manual first. The problem? The phone didn't come with a manual, so he spent the whole night hunting one down online. Yikes. Ririku decided to use the downtime to teach Kikuka how to use her phone instead. After learning how to send texts, Kikuka brought up high school. She'd always wondered what it was like, being in clubs, joining committees, and if she ended up at the same school as Ririku, the two of them could walk in together. Kikuka figured she might even find her special someone there. The two of them looked back over at the couple. Somehow, watching those two made high school feel a whole lot less terrifying. After a few more days, summer break was finally over. Poemu ran into Rui and Motoko. It had been a minute since they'd actually seen each other in person. The last stretch of break hadn't exactly been great for either of them. One look at Poemu's skin said everything. The girl had clearly lived her summer vacation, tan lines and all, which meant something. Something that had Poemu very, very on edge. She told the girls she'd just taken some walks around the neighborhood, nothing special. To make things worse, Tugo showed up. Coincidentally, also tan. The night before, Poemu had talked to Tugo on the phone about the relationship. She wanted to keep it under wraps. The real reason was that Poemu knew her 3 walking temptations she called friends would never let her hear the end of it. But what she told Tugo was that since Motoko and Rui weren't dating anyone, it would feel kind of awkward to be all coupley in front of them. Tugo was totally chill about it. Actually thought it was really sweet of Poemu to be considerate of her friends. At school, she prayed he could hold it together. The girls started trailing after him, and then he hit Poemu with the most unhinged wink she'd ever seen in her life, genuinely unsettling. The girls only just now noticed that Tugo was tan, just like Poemu, and it clicked instantly. The two had obviously spent time together. Poemu got grilled before she could even confirm anything. She denied going anywhere with Tugo. Too bad his face confirmed everything without saying a word. The guy almost had a breakdown trying to play it cool. Seiichi and Izubuchi showed up. Seiichi did not want anyone thinking he had anything to do with the weird short kid. Nothing against short people, but Seiichi wasn't thrilled about that association either. Looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth running into Izubuchi. And on top of that, he had to watch what looked like a couple having a spat in the hallway. Almost made him want to dig a hole and climb in. Poemu launched herself at Seiichi with a flying punch the second he called them a couple. Izubuchi jumped in the way to shield him, and ended up eating the hit instead. Motoko's beloved, by the way. Poemu, Motoko, and Rui were walking through school, while the two of them kept trying to pry information out of her. It was so obvious something had happened between her and Tugo. Poemu denied it again. The pressure was about to hit a breaking point when they heard Tugo laying into a couple nearby. He was telling them that relationships between students were against school rules. The couple pushed back. Honestly, since when does the school get to have a say in students' personal lives? That doesn't even make sense. And Tugo didn't think it through. He said, they were absolutely right. He totally understood how they felt. It's not easy letting go of someone you care about just because of some rule. It didn't sit right with him. And then Tugo launched into a full-on speech, practically shouting that students should be honest about what they want, that they should prove there's nothing wrong with it, that everyone should speak their truth right here, right now. The couple looked like they wanted to disappear. Tugo had completely lost the plot. Announced with full chest that he himself was in a committed relationship, started talking about marriage, started talking about the family he planned to build someday. A flying kick from Poemu shut the whole speech down. The end of the school day finally rolled around. The couple walked home together. Obviously, it had been an exhausting day for both of them. Tugo never imagined keeping a secret would be this hard. And, well, he didn't exactly keep it. Poemu felt guilty about that. She shouldn't have asked someone that honest to keep a secret in the first place. But he was willing to keep whatever secret Poemu needed, for as long as she needed. That was sweet. But Poemu didn't want Tugo keeping secrets anymore. If it was that hard on him, she wasn't about to make him do that. Poemu felt kind of dumb for a second. It was the first time she'd ever called someone her boyfriend. One day, a girl got in trouble with a teacher just for bringing a little toy to school. The teacher confiscated it and said he'd return it after class, except he never came back. That's when Tugo stepped in, grabbed the toy to return it himself since the teacher had clearly forgotten. The girl was mortified, assuming Tugo must think she was being childish, but he brushed it off. He watched the same magical girl show with his little sister. After that, the two of them became friends. It lasted right up until the day Tugo refused to bend the rules along with everyone else, and ended up getting the whole group in trouble. In high school, she ended up at a different school. Now, out of nowhere, she was wondering how that memory had even resurfaced. She'd completely forgotten about it. But she also found herself wondering how Tugo was doing, and whether he'd made any friends. Knowing him, if he was still the same as always, the odds weren't exactly in his favor. What a surprise then. Right there, right in front of her eyes, Tugo walked by, and he had a girlfriend.